Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Make Your Marker podcast from Hitmarker. I'm your host, Adam Fitch, and today I'm joined by MarkyB, a professional Call of Duty coach and former player. How you doing, man?
No, I'm great, mate. I'm having a great time today. Ready to go to the Celtic and Real Madrid match tonight. So I'm excited to, first of all, have a conversation with you because I've not really had an opportunity to do that yet. But also, it's going to be a good night, hopefully. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, a full day of high octane action, speaking to me, and then watching Champions League footy, mate. Like
Yeah,
nothing compares to the two. So firstly, it's a question you'd have heard a lot, I suppose, especially around the time. But from your transition to coach from a player, how did you expect that to go versus how was the reality of the situation? Because a lot of people tend to go down the streaming path, kind of like they've already got their Twitch set up and their Twitter following and stuff, so they just go the easy route. You've gone like, okay, I'm going to help people get better and play better and compete for championships. Like, how was that whole
yeah.
process?
For me, like that was always going to be the direction I wanted to go down after I was done competing as a player. I really just continued to enjoy the competition and wanted to continue to contribute to potential championships, like you said. So that was always my thought process. I think that although I would like to do like streaming and stuff like that, they are just not the same. It's not really as what I'm keen for. So for me, it was always wanting to stay involved and contributing to a championship was my main goal, and also like now that I'm no longer competing too, as my main goal as a competitor was always to win a world championship. I've still not done that as a coach either, so that's still up there as one of those things I want to achieve before I move on elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. And when you get like just like a normal like series win, for example, do you feel the same level of like joy and accomplishment as you did when you were playing? Now that you're a coach.
It's definitely different. You just naturally, when you're a player, you're in the thick of it and you're making the plays to potentially win your team a game. Then there's no better feeling than like clutching a big moment and you're like standing on stage, going for it. You're the one that's done that yourself, So I think that for me it is like a little different. I still do take great pride in wins and I really do enjoy them, but more from like the player's perspective, I like to see them happy. Um, for me, it's obviously a little different now, but still enjoy it nonetheless.
Yeah, because I've always thought about like because I if it's treated like a normal job, I'd just be like, yeah, job's done. Like we've won on to the next one instead of like when you're a player. Obviously, yeah, it's just pure. You're in the moment.
Yeah,
But
100%.
so you say it was always something you're like angling towards. Like, why is that? What about coaching? Is it that appeals to you?
I mean, I think for me, the first thing would be that when I was a player, I was a captain of the team, and that sort of always seen myself as a leader. So that natural, like, transition was what was in my head at some point. It honestly came earlier than I expected, but nonetheless, that was the sort of trajectory I was wanting to go down.
Got you. And so what kind of what's needed to be in the toolbox of a coach to be successful? Now you got like what are you 2-3 years down the line from becoming a coach,
Yeah,
or maybe 4 even at this point now.
yeah,
What's needed? What's necessary in your books? Because the answers vary a lot, I think, depending on who you ask, especially across like sports and even in like business and professional coaching.
yeah. I mean, that's one thing I'd say. First of all, that like you said, I'm only 4 seasons into this whole thing, so by no means am I the finished product. I think that coaching is one of those things that, in general, that over time, you're just going to continue to improve and improve with experience. And coaching in Call of Duty as a whole, there wasn't a thing early doors, so I've learned a lot. I'd say from like the people around me, especially like OAM, I've sort of been with them the entire time. So for me, they've been great for my sort of improvement. Always having the right people around to sort of give you that level of experience, especially from like a sports background. They've always done a really good job of keeping those sort of people around. From I mean, there's like it's a very big question. I think that there's a
Yes.
lot of things that come into being a top tier coach. I think number one, love for the game. I think that's probably one of my most important things. I really do love Call of Duty Esports, and that's why I put a lot of time into watching not only all the CDL matches but all the challengers matches and all these things. I just love watching COD, and I love COD Esports as a whole. Um, Second of all, just kind of understanding as your role within the team. You know, you're not there to be best friends with the guys at all times. And I think that was one of the things that I didn't recognise earlier in my career. when I first transitioned from a player, I still kind of felt as a player, if that makes sense. So I sort of acted the same way and just sort of slotted myself in almost like a fifth man. So I think from over time, that's been something that I've kind of had to learn. Season 1 of the COD League, we had 10 players, a lot of roster decisions to be made, important roster decisions after that, and like the future years as well. So for me, I think that just it's obviously been a big learning process. I think that's just one of the mindsets I have into coaching, is just I just want to have that growth mindset and continue to grow and improve. And I just know that I'm nowhere near, the peak of coaching. So there's a long way to go for that for now. Honestly, I've lost my trail of thought at this point, but I feel like I've answered it. For the most part, of course, like I can say all the other things, like what makes a good coach, like all the sort of like technical Call of Duty side of things. But I think the most important thing is just commanding respect for your team and like creating a team culture that's very open and like having that camaraderie in the team. And I feel like that's a good job that we've done with Toronto, is just creating a real team dynamic. Because I've been a part of different teams in the past where it's very like players are going behind each other's back, and we didn't have that at all. Ultra, I think that everyone was very open and honest with each other, and I think that that's like my main goal as a coach, to create that culture.
Because some people try and lead like through almost fear instead of like respect, as you say, and ultimately I don't think that creates the best bond. It creates a very weird kind of dynamic, and also like sets them apart from the team instead of them like being actually part of the team. Like that, I don't know. There's a weird disconnect there on that front, so that makes a lot of sense. And what I would ask is, I think is probably a controversial question because it comes up quite a lot, even among like broadcast talent in, say, Rainbow Six or in League of Legends. And is that, do you need to be a top tier player to be a top tier coach in your mind? Like, I know it doesn't translate entirely to analysts in terms of broadcast talent and stuff, but there's a huge debate there all the time about understanding of the game doesn't necessarily equate to your own like in-game mechanics.
No, like I said before, I think the key role of the head coach is, obviously there's a lot of Call of Duty technical stuff, but like I touched on before, I think that the team, like creating that correct team culture, is the most important job of the head coach. And then the other things are sort of extra parts of it. So for me, like that's always, like I said, been the main focus.
Got you. And do you think players, as they stand now in say Call of Duty, would respect a coach that doesn't have?
Yeah, I mean, sorry, to answer your original question as well, like I just interrupt you there. I do think it helps, but I just wanted to stress that. I just wanted to make sure I said that as well. I do think it helps having that Call of Duty knowledge at the elite level, but I don't. Like I said, it's not the most important thing. But obviously, I do have that, so I do think it's a bonus when you can conversate with players about certain things. And like last year, one thing I would always remind my players of: Insight, Bance, Cammy. I had never played Clarex, but I had a winning record against all three of those guys as a player. So I had to always keep like reminding them of that as well. So I think that was a fun part.
Oh, jeez. I mean, yeah, that's the kind of thing where it's probably a good thing I'm not a coach, because that's the only thing I would ever talk about. Like, if they ever, like, to me, ever, like, they're just getting reminded of it. I'd have it printed out on the whiteboard and all sorts, mate.
I remind them often.
So, what does, I understand there may not be a clear answer for this, but, like, what is a quote-unquote typical day? Say, like, in season, like, you're preparing for a weekend of matches in a tournament. What does a typical day for you look like? Is it head down looking at VODs? Is it working with the players? I assume it's a whole lot of everything. So
yeah, it's
an idea of that.
Yeah, it's not like every day is the same. I'll kind of like run you really quickly through a week. I think that makes more sense, right? So say we play on the weekend, we've played like Sunday, or we play Saturday. We'd usually warm up a team on the Sunday for their match, and that would kind of be like a half day off. Monday is the kind of like league wide. Everyone takes that day off on a week of matches because obviously teams need to come on Sunday to warm up other teams, so that just makes more sense for everyone. And then head back into scrims on the Tuesday. Typically, we'd start off with like a lighter day where we'd come in, have like an hour of 30 minutes to an hour of VOD beforehand, do 2 scrims, just 2 normal sets, just respawns, and then Wednesday would kick more into like the sort of S&D practice and preparation for the match on the weekend. So if we played one team on the weekend, we'd start making sure we're talking about watching VODs for those teams and preparing for those S&D maps in particular. So we'd be playing like best of 11 series against teams where we'd play, hardpoint S&D control and sort of rotate through all the different maps and game modes. And you'd sort of ramp that up in terms to the weekend, and we'd do like best of nines and stuff like that as well, and more like the finals format heading into tournaments. So that was the kind of the week, and then on the matches we'd come in a couple hours before, say 2-3 hours before. The guys would eat lunch, talk together, watch a little bit of VODs, and then we'd have an hour and a half of warm up against teams. Like, so say we start at 3, it would be like 1:30 we'd start, and then head into the game. And obviously, team talks and whatnot beforehand too. But that's sort of, usual match week. And depending on our schedule, you'd have, again, like I said, potential warm-ups on other days, and then Monday would be the day off again.
And am I right in thinking, like, for some, there seems to be like a staggered few hours between a normal waking or like a normal sleeping pattern and stuff, and COD players where they'd be waking up at like 11 p.m. 11 a.m. to like 2 p.m. and then like playing through to the early hours of the morning.
Yeah,
I mean, thinking that, or did it used to be more like that?
It definitely used to be more like that. Teams start scrims at 2 p.m. Eastern now, and like for example, teams that are based in the West Coast, they're playing at 11 a.m. So like LA Thieves, for example, these like they would be at their facility, probably around 10 a.m. every morning, for them. But our guys would typically get in like by 1 p.m. latest. So different guys were different. Like you'd have some players, not naming names, that would wake up a bit later, and some guys that were more morning guys. They wake up at like 8 a.m., go to the gym, and do a bunch of things before their scrim day started. Everyone was different, and everyone needed different things. So like as long as they were there for 1 p.m., I didn't really mind too much.
Yeah. It just never really added up to me. It seemed like everyone was just playing in like a different world, like to everyone else, where like they're getting up where like it's already well in the afternoon, and it's just like I don't understand that. Well, I'm a person who wakes up at 5 in the morning and like goes for a walk or to the gym, so it really didn't add up to me anyway. But and I was just thinking like of trying to get like the best out of your players, you wouldn't want them to. I don't know, just be disconnected in that way, I guess. But it's good that. Would you say like the franchise league has kind of helped standardize certain things and make it seem more professional as a whole in that front?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's more investment in the players are getting paid more, the staff. Like you need to get these things right at the end of the day. I mean, if I was to turn around and tell the organisation that the players were getting in late every single day, I think I'd be on the chopping block. You know what I mean? Like there's so many different variables now that comes into there's all these different people involved in the team now. It's just you're just not going to get away with it. There's other players that will take your spot. You need to really be coming in early and showing that you really do care about the team at the end of the day, because there's going to be players waiting in the wing, potentially at the bench, or potentially they're on challengers waiting to be signed. So I'd say overall, like across the the whole league, it's really professionalized for sure.
That's good, and that's in line with the industry, of course. Like we're bringing in as more like sports psychologists, and trainers and stuff now. I know like Astralis were kind of early in pushing that, or at least giving the impression they were pushing that heavily. And also they were going to do boot camps where they're not playing games, but it's just purely team building stuff. Like it feels like we're moving slowly towards like the realm of like professional sports.
Yeah.
And with that in mind, were you the kind of coach who was like you would be forcing them to eat certain ways, or like really heavily encouraging that they eat certain ways and exercising, because obviously there's numerous benefits to being a healthier person?
Yeah, definitely. Push the guys. We had like small rules with food in terms of like on the road. I'd say more specifically, like or before matches, like players didn't eat like, and this was not only created by me. This was like the players as well. They agreed that this was the right way to do things, but they wouldn't eat like red meat or like raw fish and stuff like that before games, like the night before games, because it could potentially cause upset stomachs and whatnot. You don't want that sort of thing. So that's like a kind of minor rule. The guys would typically on game days eat very clean. And I wouldn't say they were like, even myself, I wouldn't say they're like epitome of fitness. It's not like every single day we're eating chicken, rice, and broccoli for every meal. But I'd say that they did, especially around game days and whatnot. Really look after their bodies in terms of what they eat. In terms of exercise, everyone was different. They're like, some people did different things. Bands like to run. Jamie would go to the gym. Cam went on like very long walks on a regular basis. He was the walker. Same thing as Toby. Toby was kind of just always doing his own thing. And those guys again, like I said, all had their own ways of staying healthy and try to bring themselves into games in the best possible mentality they can be.
That makes sense, because I just remember like seeing like Edward Cleland, I think is how to pronounce his surname. He was working at 100 Thieves at one point with like their Valorant squad, and like he'd be like beach running with certain members of them at like ridiculous times in the morning. He was helping like Hiko, who was obviously went from CS:GO to Valorant, like get into better shape and like giving them all these supplements and stuff. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, we have come a long way, because like before, like you just like at the end of a day at some ones I've been to, like everyone's just like demolishing pizza like you've never seen, and obviously down in 15 beers as quick as possible. So It seems we've come a long way very quickly on that front, which can only be a good thing, right?
One thing I would say is that I think that it will get to that point eventually, and I think that although like I'm saying we didn't do those things, I think that that's one of those things. It's like a kind of natural progression, really. I think that you're going to see that, and I mean, there's only benefits to exercising and being in the healthiest body shape you can potentially be. Like, there's no downside, so why wouldn't it make sense to give you that extra, even if it's like 1%? It's going to make the difference, even if it's not as important as like an actual sport. It's certainly not going to have any negative side effects to it, in my opinion. So
that makes sense. And let's get into a spicy thing based on what you just said there. Is esports a sport? Coming from an esports coach and sports fanatic?
I don't really like. It depends on the way you look at it. Like, do I care if people consider it a sport? I don't really care. And like, what is the definition of a sport? Does it need to be athletic? I don't know. Like, I don't know all these things, because there's things that are definitely not athletic that are considered sports. So it's like, maybe it is a sport, but I don't actually care. I'm also leaning to the side of it as a sport, because there is other sports I'd say that are not as athletic that are still considered sports. So
darts and chess and
exactly,
and pool to a degree as well, and snooker, right?
The average weight of a darts player is definitely higher than the average weight of a COD player. I'd say that's almost a fact. I could be wrong. I could actually be wrong. Someone's probably going to prove me wrong, but
I have things to say there, but I'm being professional as the host of this podcast, so I will not throw anyone under the bus by any means. But yeah, it's probably a fair shout. But yeah, it's just, I think the only way it really matters whether it is a sport or not is like when it comes to like governmental recognition and like the professionalization of it, like getting visas. Like in Germany, like they approved with like the Esports Federation there to like fast track visas for esports athletes and recognize them as athletes. So in that sense, it matters. But in a sense of like any real debate, I agree with you. Like it doesn't matter too much whether it's considered that or not. It's just you said like actual sport in your previous answer, so I thought I just had to bring that up and see if you had a strong feeling about it either way.
True.
So and in the off season, how does that differ? Say like I know you announced that you're exploring options away from Toronto Ultra, but in previous seasons, what would you be doing to help the team prepare, and what would you be doing yourself to like prepare for the season coming up?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's first of all it's like a bit of downtime for us, but right after champs in particular, it really ramps up, because champs finishes and then it's straight into like the roster negotiation and figuring all that out. So it's a lot of kind of like a lot of meetings with the management and like figuring out all those sort of side of things, which obviously takes a lot of time. Is meetings with players, and it's actually very time consuming for those couple of weeks after champs. But like, once you've got your roster like sort of finalized, I think it was our Toronto Ultra roster last year was like three weeks after, maybe, or 2 weeks after, something like that along those lines. So after that period's done, then everyone knows like the date we're coming back to Toronto. There's a bit more downtime in between that period of time, and I think that's where spend more time with friends and family and whatnot. Everyone's sort of just recharging the batteries for the next season ahead, going on vacations if they want to and whatnot. But apart from that, like in between all that, obviously we're sort of preparing for next season in terms of set expectations for the start of the season, all these sort of things. We have welcome meetings at the start of the year where me and the other coaches and The management and whatnot will have discussions with the players, like the expectations we want to, bring into next season and setting goals and whatnot, all these sort of things. So we need to prepare for those in advance. So there's some of that work going on behind the scenes, but like I said, mostly downtime.
Got you. And COD's unique in that there's a new title every year, right? So
Yeah.
like you don't even really know what you're playing until like the new game is released. So you can't. I suppose you can't go too hard into preparation on that front.
Yeah, exactly. I guess it's a blessing and a curse. Like, to be honest, right now, like I wish I was like just getting right back into COD and doing the coaching side of things. I do appreciate the downtime, but that's just, I guess, the beauty of COD having a new game every year that we, I guess, get that. It's good for us. I think it's good
And
for the mental reset.
do do you think some players go like overboard, completely OTT when the new game comes out? And obviously, it really matters the first 2-3 weeks of like playing a game. You can really separate yourself by like grinding hard on other people, and I guess even like watching your gameplay and trying to figure things out on that sense. Like almost to me suggests like you need to put in more hours than anyone else very early on to get that advantage, and that isn't necessarily the most productive and healthy way of going about things, especially like later in the season.
Yeah, no, I definitely think there's like a burnout period around like the start of the year. Like all the players in the league go hard off the start. They go extremely hard. They're grinding, and then I'd say like after Christmas time, after like the first event, I'd say there's usually typically like a little burnout period where quite a few of the teams are like getting out, obviously, having more internal issues and whatnot, all these sort of things. And I think that comes down to the amount of time they're putting into it at the start. It kind of burns them out, especially if they don't get the result they maybe wanted at like the first tournament of the season, which typically would be around like January, February time. So yeah, I think that a lot that's where the sort of frustrations of the game start to build and whatnot. I do think it's good for the players though, like if they're enjoying it to like, put that grind in if they feel so. But I think overplaying can be a bit of an issue and something that players have definitely got to manage throughout a season. I mean, at the end of the day, you've just got to peak at the right time. Like, look at last season, right? 100 Thieves were, for the most part, like okay throughout the entire season, and then they come in the last two events, they peak at the right time, and they win arguably the two most important events of the season, and everyone is just going to remember, 100 Thieves being, world champions and that from this season. And that's all that really matters at the end of the day, that world championship. Obviously, if you were to win every tournament, that would be great, but I would take one world championship over 4 majors for sure.
Oh, wow, that's interesting, actually. That is interesting, because that's almost like consistency versus, yeah, as you say, peaking at the right time, right? And I know you say you're chasing that world championship, so it makes a lot of sense. And realistically, there's more money and prestige, and almost like the rest of the season doesn't really matter, does it? Like at the end of the day, like in 3 years' time, everyone will look back and say, yeah, LA Thieves are the best team in this game.
Yeah.
End of, no matter how they did in the first like 2-3 majors.
Don't get me wrong, like you definitely want to win every tournament, and every event is massively important. But in terms of like in the history books and like no one really truly remembers that much about the only individual events, in my opinion. Like mostly it comes down to like the team that wins that world championship that year that gets the most amount of credit. And I think that of course consistency is massively important. And like our team didn't do that. Like we were the average like fourth, I think, over the season in terms of placement. Last season we obviously won one event, but we came like with a lot of second places, so we were extremely consistent as a team in terms of like average placing. But still, I mean, like at the end of the day, you definitely want to win as much as possible. But I think the World Championship takes the cake.
That makes sense. And just before I forget, on like the roster front, how involved have you been in the past over potential changes and such, right? Because I know in American sports they've got the role of GM, who's kind of the puppet master making all the decisions. I don't know if we're that fleshed out when it comes to like top tier esports as a whole, really. So like, what's your involvement in the construction beyond just like in season when it comes to like who you should be bringing in or maybe keeping or not?
Yeah, it's definitely a big collaborative effort. It's the upper management, the other coaching staff, everyone comes together. We have these meetings and discussions together, and we come to like a general consensus as a group, and that's how we typically work things. But of course, like the management are going to trust our COD knowledge and whatnot. They're not gonna turn around and be like, no, this guy's a better SMG Slayer. Like do you know what I mean? They don't understand the game to the same level as us, of course,
Yeah.
and I don't think they'll mind me saying that. I think that's like a fair presumption with most of the organizations. Like there's definitely some teams that have those guys that are in the management that have a bit more Call of Duty experience. The likes of 100 Thieves had Mud Dog, and like Nade Shot, of course, at the very top. So I think that there's like different organizations in different situations that have that, but not everyone does.
No, that makes sense. And I guess I was like still expecting, or at least it seems like it from the outside sometimes, like players seem to have a lot of say. Like they're simply going to say like, no, I'm not teaming with this person. So like if they have the power to do that, they can basically, in a sense, from the outside, like dictate who they're teaming with, and it doesn't matter what the people above them are saying or thinking.
Yeah, I mean, for us, I think that we've always been in a situation where we've been the ones to make those decisions, and for the most part, I think that the players have trusted our decisions on that. So for me, I think that it's never really been an issue. But I obviously heard that has happened in other situations. But at the end of the day, I think for the most part, the players should be trusting the organisation and the sort of management, coaching staff to make the best decisions for the team. Because players can have other agendas and whatnot as well. Like at the end of the day, our goal is only to see the team win. Whereas that can be different in a player situation. We're only judged on that. Maybe some players might not want a specific player because it might affect their KDs, stuff like that. And that happens. That happens in some teams. I mean, obviously everyone wants to win as well. And I think that that's the main goal for most of them. But I think players should honestly trust the management for the most part in those regards because they don't understand the amount of conversations they're probably having. They're spending hours and hours talking about these rosters and making these decisions. But obviously, the players' opinions in certain scenarios are going to be taken into account.
Mm-hmm. And based on the fact that, like, as we say there, like there are some egos. Of course, these people are trying to be the best in the world and be named the best in the world. Of course, they're going to have egos. But like, as a result of that, how important and how prevalent is like conflict resolution for like what you do as a coach? I assume that's like I'm not saying they're scrapping every day, but they're going to have differences of ideas, whether it's in game or whatever, right? So it must play a big part.
Yeah, 100%. Like that's like I said, one of the things that when I first came into coaching, I was more so thinking from a strategy side, and that's what I was going to bring. But from my experience as a player, but over time, that has definitely been a major part of my role and having to making sure that these arguments are going to happen, and making sure at the end of it that we're all aligned on what we're going to do together, and I think that's the main goal. So for me, it's definitely been something that I've took time to learn over years, but it's definitely a massively important part of being a top tier Call of Duty coach.
Mm-hmm. You just
I'm not saying I am, but
I'm winning record against 3 of you motherfuckers anyway, so shut up, listen to me. Bloody hell, man. So, bit of a meta question. Who coaches a coach, in a sense? Like, where do you, what resources or programs, education or people, like what recommendations do you have there for like, what inspires you and helps you to learn, has helped you to develop over the past few years?
Yeah, I definitely take as much wisdom as I can from the people around me. Like I said, I think I've been very fortunate in the Toronto Ultra situation where we've had a bunch of people, in the upper management. We had Borko, who was brought in as like a performance coach, and he's like from a sports background. I've worked under a different performance coach previously to that as well, called Adam Jansen, who was like the season one performance coach. But again, just learning from these people from a more sports background and try to take little things from that, from their coaching experience, and bring it into my own game. And obviously trying to introduce it in a way that works in Call of Duty, as well as not only that, like at Ultra, they had a bunch of great people around the top of the organisation that had big sports backgrounds with like the Canadian Olympic Committee and stuff like that. So these sort of guys had a lot of lessons to give, and the way they carry themselves and whatnot, I think was massively important. So I think that just learning from them as much as possible, just soaking as much information as you can from the people around you. Even your friends and family, I think sometimes can give good words of wisdom. So I think that just listening, trying to learn, reading. I've read a few books. My favourite one was probably Leading by Alex Ferguson. I really enjoyed that book. Apart from that, I'm sure there are a bunch of online resources. To be honest with you, I've learned a lot on the job, just learning from
Right.
experience and just learning from people around me.
Yeah, man. Well, there's like different styles, isn't there? There's some people who purely want to go the academic route and they
Yeah,
don't really test out what they've learned until the X amount of years down the road. And as those people that have installed themselves in a deep end early and have gone the experience route, I guess it's almost like university versus like an apprenticeship. Like, there's no right or wrong way about it, but
yeah,
just different routes to get
yeah.
to the same kind of end.
One thing I'd say is like I'm a guy that's very like I'm willing to try new things, trying out new, and one new thing doesn't work, don't do it. If it does work, you do it again. It's one of those things, just like giving new things a try and seeing what works and what doesn't work in a team environment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes complete sense to me, mate. So, like, is Call of Duty at the point yet where like specialist coaches are necessary and even like justifiable on a financial for orgs? Because I know there's been like S&D coaches and stuff, right? But like, I just wonder if it's at that point as a whole yet where like you're not responsible for absolutely everything. Like, you have the assistant coach under you and strategic coaches and stuff, right? What's the setup there?
Yeah, for me, I definitely think it's beneficial. I mean, it obviously has to make sense from a financial standpoint. We've always, in the last 2 seasons, we had sort of myself and Flux, who's my assistant coach, starting off the year just as a two pairing. And Cold War, we brought in Joe, who was like ex-coach of London Royal Ravens in the first season, towards the end of the year, and he sort of acted as like a kind of an extra pair of eyes, a new perspective, midway into the season, which we think had a lot of benefit to us and helped improve us in multiple different areas. Same thing again from this season. Again, we brought in Mayhem, who was working with our academy team primarily initially, but then towards the end of the season worked more so with the starting roster. Again, I think it's just good to have different perspectives. Although we didn't get the finish we wanted at the Call of Duty Championship, but we definitely made a lot of improvement in hardpoint, which is one of the reasons the Mayhem was brought in, and we made a lot of improvements in hardpoint there. Unfortunately, uncharacteristically, our S&D, which was third all season in terms of statistic, we then come in and don't win a single S&D at the World Championship and finish top six, which I know is in the top half of the league, but at the end of the day, it's still not what we want to achieve.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned the academy. Do you view that like truly as like a feeder system, or like to put that also puts a bit of pressure upon like the main starting roster, or was it purely just to have a secondary team for overactive media? Which there's no harm if that's the case.
No, it definitely wasn't just to have a secondary team to overactive media. I think that it provides multiple things. You touched on a few of them. Providing that pressure for the players in the starting roster to know they've got someone potentially waiting in the wings to take their spot. Especially when we had like players like Scrappy and Hixie in house at the in the facility in Toronto with us. So I mean, I can give you an example. Like we would be scrimming against the NA Academy team, and they would win a map, and Scrappy would come into the room and be chatting shit to excuse my language, but all right. I don't even know if I would swear, but why not? But yeah, chatting rubbish to their team. He comes in, sort of lights their fire, and they come in, go and they step up a level even higher. And I think that just having that there and that environment, and it also allows you to bring those players more seamlessly into the starting roster if you do want to make those changes down the line. Like we had Insight there last season, who we obviously brought into the starting roster in place of Methods, and he was there in our room, constantly under our watch. We were seeing how he operated and seeing what he brought to the table, and obviously he already had that connection that he'd built with the players rather than being back home in Europe or someone else, like not really interacting with those guys and then potentially getting moved back in. But yeah, I mean, there's that side of things. There's obviously like the lighting the fire. There's potentially securing yourself future talent. You might not bring them in at any point, but potentially you could use them in trades. Selling for a financial benefit, all these sort of things. So from the business perspective, making sure you're set up for success in the future, I think it makes most sense. And obviously, we want to win as well. So there's that factor too. I mean, we could have just signed 4 players and not had support staff around them and whatnot. But we did have that, and we worked alongside S&G as well, like a partnership there. So they had their management working alongside that team as well. So for us, like we had a team that was set up to have success in both Europe and NA, and players that we believe that we're the next generation of Call of Duty talent, and a lot of these players now are rumored to potentially be on starting rosters and whatnot. So you never know. You'll see what happens in the future, but if that does happen, I think that it just proves that it's worked out for Toronto.
That's good, because I mean, like, you look at League of Legends, for example, which many say is like the biggest esport, and in some respects it is. You can say that, but like they have academy rosters in a sense, but they're in like the regional league. So if you're G2, for example, they were competing in Spain
Yeah,
and so on. It feels just like secondary, like more localized teams rather than the same kind of setup you had where they were like true academy rosters. And Valve for CS:GO like ruled against academy rosters in several different ways. EG are trying to change that. They've got like 3 rosters going on now, 15 players. So like there are different kind of like not necessarily academy, but like feeder team setups that are out there across esports, but none of them in like the traditional kind of sense you'd expect if you look at sports. So it's good to hear like the setup you had in like the previous season was like it was working well, because I think while it's a no-brainer, you still do need a proof of concept, because it is an investment and responsibility, and a lot of resources have to go towards those players, right?
yeah. For me, like I felt that we had exactly what the plans we'd set out. I didn't have any doubts that with the core rosters we had built initially, that those teams wouldn't have success. And at the end of the day, I mean, the next best players are the ones that are doing the best and winning in challengers and coming through that way. So we were set up for success there, and then the guys all had very consistent seasons on both teams, and now they're going to reap the rewards.
Perfect stuff. And I've only got one or two more bits and bobs, mate, and I'll let you go so you can go get ready for the footy. But so back when you were like competing in like the early days, like TCM, like Dignitas Infused, I'm pretty sure all 3 of those teams you were on.
Yeah,
thank
you're
God.
correct.
Okay,
you're spot on.
That's
Good
memory
job.
as well. That's pre-journalism, like pre me working in esports. We'll take that. Uh, how were things back then in terms of like before? Was it just like you guys just turned up to the event, having just played online and scrimmed against some other people, and that was it? Versus obviously all the procedures and systems and best practices you've got in place these days. I imagine it's a completely different kettle of fish, like almost incomparable, and it's not even like 10 years ago.
Yeah, honestly, it's definitely a lot different. We did we scrimmed later in the day. I think scrim started like 6 o'clock in the evening. Our sleep schedules weren't good. We definitely didn't eat healthy. Yeah, I mean, we were probably having a few pints the night before a match. We were, there was none of that same professionalism for sure. But I mean, it was getting there. I'm not saying we were going out and getting steaming the night before matches, but it definitely wasn't like I mean, maybe on some occasions. Actually, now that I think about it, but yeah, again, go back to the question. I think that it's definitely changed a lot since then. And the format has changed as well. I think back in those days, you were having a tournament almost. You potentially sometimes there was some months where it was like 3 tournaments in a month and stuff like that, where you'd be going from one place to the other. Whereas we're having these very drawn out seasons now, where we've got one match on a weekend and we're preparing for that one team. So it's completely different to going to one tournament and playing against potentially 100 different teams in open bracket, and you can't really sit there and do all that game planning and whatnot for an entire tournament bracket, which would be squeezed into 2 days.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's just I just think that's a useful like thought exercise. Just thinking back to like 7-8 years ago, and you realize like, yeah, while there may be ways to go in some esports still, like they're coming a long way very very quickly too. And what would you say? Like, what are you personally hoping to see like develop in like the realm of coaching over the next few years? Like, what would be helpful to you that you don't have currently?
I definitely think the sort of analysis side of things can continue to develop to the point where you can have more like, obviously, of course, players have there's strategies and whatnot, but I feel like the sort of the continued improvement of the sort of on the tech side when it comes down to like being able to strategize against opponents, doing specific break-offs and whatnot. We obviously already do these things, but I think it can be taken to another level. I think that like I was touching on multiple times throughout this conversation, I think that coaching is going to continue to just blossom as time goes on, just through the experience players are going to, not players, coaches are going to gain throughout that time. And I think that overall, there's going to be more investment and continued improvement in the Call of Duty eco space and lessons learned from every team. And typically, the way it works is it has how it's worked in Call of Duty Esports, and I think this just works in all sports. There's always just a natural progression there, and I think that at the end of the day, one guy's going to innovate and do something a specific way, and someone else is going to have to innovate again. It's going to continue to change and evolve as time goes on, and just being ready for that, and just not stuck in your same ways, I guess, is probably my thought process going into these next few seasons. Just continue to want to learn and improve.
It's an exciting thing because it's like almost entirely cognitive, right? As a sport, if we're looking at it that way, instead of like you can go to the gym and work on your physical fitness, but like we don't know necessarily the exact ways in which to fine tune the skills and cognitive abilities necessary to be good in video games. I think that's some of the exciting bits. And you've got like State Space, which is behind AIM Labs. Like looking into a bunch of those things, and as obviously as Adamus Esports and G Science and similar firms who are trying to help unlock new, I guess, new levels of performance in esports as well. So as you say, like it's there's a lot to come still, but it is coming, and that's the main thing. And it's an exciting time to be in the industry, to be fair. And I've been quite pessimistic about esports for a while, so it's interesting to hear me say something nice like that. I just caught myself off there. I was like, that didn't sound right.
I just to add one more thing onto that, I do think that the way teams practice and whatnot can definitely improve. I think that the way it's done currently, where we have like a 2.5 hour scrim slot that we squeeze a lot of maps into, we don't really have as much time in between those maps. It's maybe like 3 to 5 minutes at most in between these, potentially sometimes less. So there's like not as much time to game plan, strategize, and I think that at the end of the day, naturally, I think that the schedules of players is going to need to get better. So like the day starting earlier, where we're sort of more on like a scrim starting 11 a.m, having like a break in between where we can have lunch and dissect the games, and then having scrims later on, and just kind of extending that day, because I feel like it is kind of squeezed in and condensed a lot, but it's kind of a weird balance as well, because I think the only reason we're not moving to that currently is because obviously we have teams in the West Coast, so that kind of makes that a bit difficult. Without everyone on the same time schedule and the way CODs practice, you have to rely on other teams to practice against, obviously, so it's not like traditional sports in that sense. So it's kind of hard. It's a hard balance.
Okay, I hate esports again now. After that, order has been restored, mate. Balance, perfect. No, I'm joking. But mate, I'm going to let you get off. Thank you very much for taking the time. And your Twitter's going to be in the description of the YouTube and on the audio platforms. Was there anything else you want to shout out or plug or whatever? That, as long as it's not too out there, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really want to plug any of my social medias or anything like that. I just want to say I'm raising money for Alzheimer's Scotland. So if you want to donate anything, even £1, the link's on my Twitter. It's at the top. I'm doing like a 10k run for that. I might potentially try for the half marathon, because I done a 10k really easily the other day. But I mean, that might be a bit of a stretch, but we'll see.
You say you did it really easily.
Well, yeah, actually, it was like I could have went further. Like I genuinely was mind blown, because I was only training running 5Ks to like 5 to 7Ks, and then one day I was like, okay, I'm gonna try and as I am progressing, try to do a longer distance. Got to like 7 kilometers in, was like, I'll just do 8, and then got to 8 kilometers in. I was like, I could easily do this 10k in under an hour, which was my goal the whole time. I was like, I could do this anyway. I could do this now. So I just breezed it. Could have probably done an extra couple kilometers. That's the way I felt anyway. But then the next day I did feel kind of wrecked. But I definitely could have squeezed out an extra 2 kilometers, I reckon.
Okay. Well, yeah. So yeah, your Twitter will be linked in the bio, and from there people can go and find the link should they feel like being generous, which I encourage, of course. So, mate, thank you very much for taking the time. A little gem for the people that have made it this far. Like we had 2 failed recordings before this, so thank you very much for your patience in us getting that sorted out, because Zencaster did not want us to get this done, but we finally got there, man. So thank you very much, man. Hope you enjoy the footy, and cheers everyone for watching and listening. See you on the next episode. Cheers.